You goddamn right I did. I'm sorry. There was a huge line, but our seats were reserved for the IMAX 70mm showing, so I was like, why is there a line? T-shirt sizes, that's why. And I got this motherfucker. Damn right I'm gonna wear it during the review. It's a little itchy. Now that I got my boasting out of the way, hey guys, David here with a rather quick review of Dunkirk, and the reason why it's going to be quick is because this is a rather simplistic review from a director that I think his most biggest criticism from very wide audiences from recent memory would have to be that some of his films have been just a little bit bloated and on the heavier side when it comes to running time. This is the man, Christopher Nolan, the man, the myth, the legend, who was able to make a near 3-hour Batman movie. So it came as a humongous shocker that a movie like Dunkirk, which is a historical, epic, well, somewhat of an epic film based on the events of Dunkirk, which happened in the section of Dunkirk, France during World War II, where you had all these British and French soldiers that were virtually trapped on this beach because they didn't have the proper Allied forces, and they were kind of pushed to that brink by the German forces during the outset of World War II, and they had no other place to really go. Christopher Nolan, the man that you already know at this point from the Dark Knight trilogy to Inception, Interstellar, whatever, he took this story, adapted it into a film, and we were all kind of expecting it to be that nearly 3-hour mark of telling all these stories and going the full mile to tell this epic this big epic thing, basically. And then we purchased our tickets, we go on IMDb, and it says right there the movie's only an hour and 45 minutes. And that worried me slightly at first, because generally when we see a film that has a very broad scope like this, or like when I heard that Deadpool was only like an hour and 45 minutes, I get just a little cautious, because that means that the movie can go at a brisk pace, sure, but they can kind of eliminate some things that can work for the movie, like character development or the proper feel of the set of consequences that these characters go through, because we don't have enough time to really digest them on an emotional level. That's always my biggest fear with this movie, especially when you take a very mainstay director like Christopher Nolan and put him up against this kind of material. So going in, I thought, okay, maybe on the much more optimistic side, maybe this is a way for him to kind of eliminate some of that bloatiness, which I did kind of understood with Interstellar, because I really liked that movie, but there were moments where I felt like we were just going through too many scenes, through too many motions, and they could have trimmed a little bit of that fat. Here, I thought, okay, maybe if you were to go ahead and just get straight to the point and deal with this massive situation that these characters and these guys were dealing with back in World War II on that Dunkirk beach, then maybe you might have a really great film on your hands. And in fact, Christopher Nolan did. Based on the running time alone and the way that the movie really just drops you in the middle of it, I mean, the movie has virtually no setup. You're in the middle of the street, and from that point onward, it's all about the ticking that you hear from Hans Zimmer's score about time eventually running out, because it just closer and closer does the enemy draw, because you have these characters, you have this army, this British army, ranging between ages, what is it, like 16 or 17 to 30 or 40 or whatever, of these men just trapped on this beach with nowhere else to go. And from that point on, the movie becomes a situational movie where you, from one segment of the movie of one character being on the beach to a set of characters in their planes up in the sky, to this officer played by Kenneth Branagh dealing with James Darcy's character, this other officer, trying to figure out what the hell are we gonna do and how much time do we really have left, to then Mark Rylance's character, who is just an ordinary civilian trying to go out there and do the right thing with his boys to try to fish out as many of soldiers out of the water as they possibly can, because they have the ability to go out there, or even if it's not allowed, go out there and try to help out, because there's some kind of moral obligation there. And you're intercutting, the movie starts off very straightforward, but then over time it intercuts with all these different stories. But then the intercutting becomes even much bigger than that, and that's when Nolan goes back to the fun that he would have with movies like Memento, where you start to tie in these storylines together in a very unconventional form, where you're just jumping back and forth, not only through different locations, but through even various time periods. And I don't want to speak too much about how the technical aspects of this movie, from the beautiful cinematography to, again, Hans Zimmer's score, to the camera work and the way that Nolan was able to script out these situations, because that's kind of the point of this movie. It's the experience and the intensity of this war that Nolan was able to kind of take on without the need to do the what you can kind of argue is now the stereotypical route of these war movies where you have the bloodshed, you have limbs being blown off or whatever. We just had a recent movie do that with Hacksaw Ridge, and that was all up for the awards or whatever. But I respect Nolan for being able to be like, you know what, enough with all that, enough with these big movies that are 2+ hours, have all this blood and guts and all that stuff. How about something that's a little bit much more simplistic, something that the whole family could technically go see, but at the same time be able to still get that feeling of time running out and having that edge of your seat feel, because you got these people that are just literally in this tiny little corner and you don't know at what moment somebody could go or how much time they got left. And it's just that constant ticking that's just ringing in your ears. And that ringing, along with the visual scope of this movie, especially when you get to some of those aerial shots and those dogfights amongst the pilots, one of them being played by Tom Hardy, gets even much more intense, and the cinematography just flourishes even more when you do see the movie in the 70mm. I know this sounds like a promotional plug, but I gotta be honest, I am so fucking glad I saw this in an IMAX theater where they were able to show this on 70mm, because for one, it's on film. Sure, ever so often you see the little specks that you see on the little frame of the actual physical film, which brings me the nostalgic feeling of seeing movies projected in the old-fashioned way, but also because this, I think, is the first IMAX movie that I saw in what you can consider true IMAX, where it's sure it's projected on a large screen, but more often than not, whenever you do see a movie in IMAX, you usually got the black bars at the bottom and the top, because they weren't either shot on IMAX or they were shot on like a lower tier version of IMAX. This is like the full-on IMAX 70mm that can only be done on that version of physical film, and because of that, it's able to fill up literally the entire screen. And me and my girlfriend were in a seat that was able to just be able to see the scope of this screen and how large it was, but at the same time it felt very immersive. And that, along with the surround sound, Nolan, along with his sound designers and his cinematographer Hoyte van Hoytema, what a goddamn name, I am certain they're going to get Oscar nominations for their technical work, because it's outstanding. It's a beautiful looking film. So many shots, whether they were filmed in IMAX or even some that Nolan wasn't able to get the camera on a boat or something like that, that were shot in the traditional 35mm. They still looked outstanding, and it was one of the things that definitely helped the experience for the film. Now, with that being said, here comes my only criticism that the IMAX layer on top of the film wasn't able to necessarily cover up, and that is that even though the movie is all about the experience of war and how tense the situation is and how enthralling it could be, I think that intensity and those emotions could have been heightened up just a little stronger, and this probably would have been this would have made the movie almost damn near perfect if I just knew a little bit more about the characters, because Nolan was maybe just a little busy trying to structure the movie on both a technical level and also on a storytelling level, with the intercutting that was very cool, and by the end of the movie it's fun to kind of connect the dots. But the characters inhabiting the story are just a tiny bit two-dimensional. It's just a tiny bit. You know enough of them to make you care, to make you gasp whenever they're stuck in a very strict situation that has you gasping for breath, almost literally, when certain characters are on the brink of drowning. That is filmed just so well. But I do think I could have cared just a little more if some of these characters were a little less silent, because this is a nearly silent movie, and so many scenes just have characters just looking at each other. And through that emotion, they were able to heighten the acting abilities of some of these actors, whether to be very name-dropping actors like, again, James D'Arcy, Kenneth Branagh, Tom Hardy, whatever, but then even some of the lesser-known characters who, sadly, their names I can't remember, and the only name, sadly, I can remember is because of where he came from, and that is, of course, Harry Styles. And honestly, I will say Harry Styles was pretty good. I mean, he wasn't, like, Oscar caliber, but I didn't necessarily have that down in my mind, because if Christopher Nolan cast somebody you would not expect in a movie like this, that's usually because he saw something. This is the guy who took David Bowie and made him Nicholas Tesla in The Prestige, and that worked. Harry Styles actually works rather well in this movie, along with de-aged human clone Christian Bale. All right, Fionn Whitehead. Fionn, I can't pronounce his first name, but our main character, our main dude here, who's like I said, like 17 or 18 or whatever, the main guy that we follow in the majority of the story that takes out the most amount of screen time. He was also pretty good, but I'll admit that the majority of our characters, almost in every single storyline, it's just a tiny bit shallow. And I wish they were as deep as the waters that they found themselves in amongst the beach of Dunkirk. I will admit, however, the one that stood out to me the most was this entire storyline with Mark Rylance's character, the BFG, going on his ship and catching one of these soldiers played by Cillian Murphy, and the dynamic between him and the boys and what's going on right there. That's probably the most emotion that you're gonna be able to really reconcile with or really resonate with amongst all of the other characters. But besides that, it's all about the experience and the intensity, and that's what Nolan was aiming for, and I think he aced it. Is it one of the best films of the year like every other critic is saying? For the time being, it is. But that's the thing. For the time being. Right up there with Baby Driver, it is definitely one of the best films of the year. But if even better films come out for the remaining, 4.5 months or so, then I might have to bump this off. Only because of that remark I have with the characters not being as deep as they could have been, and that would have helped the movie be a damn near masterpiece. So for that, I'm going to be giving Dunkirk a very, very high and enthusiastic 8 out of 10. It's on the brink of being that 9 if it wasn't for the character development that could have been just a little stronger, because I know Nolan can do it. It's just that he was just so captured within the experience of war that one of the best things to really help us experience that war is if there's characters in there that we can feel really emotionally tied to. And I cared about them, but I wasn't tied to them. I think it just could have been helped slightly a notch. Besides that though, I recommend seeing Dunkirk, and I definitely recommend, if you can, within your area, find it on a 70mm print, because that's the way to see this movie, and I'm so glad that I did. I know it's a little cost effective, but you might end up getting a shirt. So if you have seen Nolan's latest film, Dunkirk, please let me know in the comments below what you guys thought of the film. Again, it was going to make up for a short review because there's not much more that I can really explain about the film, and even if I do, it's much more on the technical level, and that's something that you kind of have to behold for yourselves. So what was exactly your experience watching the film? Did you see it on the 70mm IMAX print? If so, let me know your guys' experience with both the visuals, the sound, the way that the whole theater just lit up whenever there was an explosion. And do you think that you shared the same criticisms with me, like the characters having the potential to be a little bit better? And do you think Harry Styles' hair was fantabulous? Because even when he was in the middle of it with water and oil and stuff like that, is it just me, or was this hair still perfect? Also, don't forget to hit the like and share button to support the video, and of course support the channel by hitting the subscribe button down below. Follow me on Instagram and on Twitter at DarkSpiderDavid, and keep in tune for future videos coming soon. Until next time, guys, take care.